Trustee Ron Wilson.
Present.
Trustee Hartley McIntosh. Trustee Neil Gaynor.
Present.
Trustee Kyle Mays.
Here.
Trustee Jan Price.
Here.
Trustee Ted Stanley.
Here.
Trustee David Smith.
Here.
Trustee Hugh Conard is absent
Nielsen
today.
is filling
Trustee Diane Nielsen is here.
I'm the alternate.
Trustee Bob Lux is here, and Trustee Paul Martin.
Here.
We have a forum. We have an agenda. We're going to have a meeting. So first, item number 2 is the invocation and pledges of allegiance. We can stand, please. Heavenly Father, we come before you today as an assembled body. We humbly request that you bless our meeting, our community, and our nation. Help us to diligently work for the common good and in the best interest of those who we have been elected to represent. Guide us to be insightful and prudent in our intentions, visions, plans, deliberations, decisions, and their fulfillment. Work through us to provide a spirit of welcome to all in attendance. Engage in respectful and thoughtful dialogue and discussion with understanding, wisdom, and humility. Amen.
Amen.
If you wish, prior to reciting the pledges of allegiance, please take an additional moment of silent prayer or additional reflection in the manner of your preference. Thank you. Pledge of allegiance to the United States of America flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pledge to the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to these factors, one faith under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, comments from the public. Know that we have one. Mr. Arthur Bredehoff, welcome this evening, sir.
I appreciate it. President, trustees, members of the public. I'm here as a taxpayer ratepayer. It's a great day because today is Flag Day, June 14th. And the flag means many things to many people. But one thing is clear to me, that the body here tonight, that is a governmental body, is a representation of what that flag means. Commitment, dedication, and taking care of the citizens of this community. So we appreciate all of you. Thank you. The other reason I'm here is to reconfirm I'm a candidate in a special purpose district running for re-election to the Montgomery Central Appraisal District. And I would really appreciate the support of the MUDs in this community of that candidacy. I'm also making contact with all the other MUDs and special purpose districts in Montgomery County to let them know I am a candidate and to ask for their support. We'll see where the election goes. The other thing that took place today, as a director of NCAD, we had the chief appraiser here, Janet Jennings Doyle, make a presentation to both Eric and Jeannie on the 2024 MCAD budget that was passed yesterday by the board as a draft. So we spent well over an hour talking about the components of the budget. One item that's in the budget, there will be a special assessment to all the taxing units on a new software that will cover from 2024 to 2028. It is a fixed price for the software, licensing, conversion, and all the warranty components for the new software. Our current software is 15 years old. We can't buy enough duct tape. We're at that point. Vendors don't want to support it. There's no upgradable versions. So we're at a point that we have to make a change. The reason I bring up software, you guys are looking at software for the district. So software and technology for employees and for customers, extremely important as we move forward beyond 2023. So thanks for the time. I appreciate it, and good success tonight.
Thank you, Arthur.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Anyone else? Very good. We can now move to the consent agenda, items 4, 5, and 6. Review and act on the minutes of the board meeting from May of 23. Review and act on the financial reports and disbursements in May of 23. And adaptation of a resolution adopting a list of qualified brokers to engage in investment transactions with the district. These will go from pages 1 through 14 of our meeting packet.
I move approval of consent agenda.
We have a motion for approval of the consent agenda as submitted. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from trustee Martin. Trustee McIntosh made the motion. Further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Meeting passes. The motion passes. The meeting passes. Okay. Okay, that brings us to item 7. Receive the regular monthly SJRA Woodlands Division report, including update on infrastructure funding, update on wastewater strategic plans. Mr. Meeks, Mr. Shackelford.
Be Mr. Shepard to start. Good evening.
Very good. Good evening.
Y'all seen the news that our general manager has resigned? And I have a statement I'd like to read to you all so that maybe we can set aside any anxiety or concerns that might be. So first of all, we would like you to know the board is extremely supportive of Jay Houston and how he has led the organization and what he has accomplished over the last 12 years. Jake's resigned to preserve the board and the SJRA from unwarranted negative publicity and scrutiny. The board didn't ask or want Jace's resignation, but they respected his decision to put the interests of the organization, our customers, ahead of himself. Importantly, they are extremely supportive of the decisions and the strategic direction being led by staff. The executive committee of the board will recommend to the full board on June 22nd at our regular meeting an individual to serve as the acting general manager until a permanent general manager is selected and assumes the position. Also on June 22nd, board will engage an executive search firm to solicit resumes and conduct interviews of potential candidates for the permanent general manager position. And finally, the senior management team is intact. It is committed to staying at SJRA through any of this transition and beyond. There is one planned retirement, which has little or no impact to the organization. So we're ready to keep moving forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Chris is going to talk to you about the
I
MOA.
think that's very comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Meeks, good evening.
Good evening. I was hoping I'd get all your questions out on that, but on the monthly report, I'm going to ask you to flip to page 19. Let's have one item to brief you on. So the last couple months worth of MUD meetings, we've had some questions come back on the Woodlands Division projects. Some about design, some construction, some budget related, some comments. And so what we are doing is we are redeveloping that page to give a little bit more transparency and clarity to it. So we are splitting out design budget from construction budget, design contract from construction contract, so you can follow through the entire thing. So that's helpful. We've also added the contractual final completion. We always had a final completion date, but that was not always a contractual final completion. So this is now contractual final completion. So y'all can see if it's going over the contract time, and if so, you'll see the comments now, why it's going. If we're in design and we're at 50% design, rather than saying on track, we're going to say we're at 50% design, 60% design. So adding a little bit more detail in there to hopefully answer some of the questions y'all may have. That is the only item I have on the monthly operations report.
Yes, on this, are those the before, months next week? Or are you, this is still a process?
Good point. So we didn't have ready in time to put together for the trustees, but we fully do have it. We will have it for the months next week where it'll be filled out entirely, right? Okay.
So Chris, page 16, I noticed some changes here on the rolling 12-month water loss. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
So same thing, we've gone through and we've looked at the rolling 12-month water loss, and we've basically just added up the numbers, okay? We always had the unaccounted for, then the total, but we never showed the other part of the equation. So what you now have is the accounted for loss at 2.118. The unaccounted for at 192, and then of course the total, which adds those two up. Accounted for is, we know we had a water main break, and we have calculations tell us how much water, well flushing, tank flushing, fire hydrant flushing, so on and so forth. That's accounted for. Unaccounted for is everything else. We started with A, we're at C, I don't know where B went. What we've also done below that is added the monthly accounted for water loss. So the items that we look at every month and say, okay, these are the items, in this case, flushing of elevated storage tanks. Those higher numbers, like when we flushed EST5, that was 15,000 gallons. So if we would have had a big water main break in April, we would put that on there so y'all can see some of the main contributors to the accounted for water loss, just to see what makes up that. Trying to add a little bit more detail, plus we have a lot of white space there, so figure.
I was doing page 23. We went 50-50, everybody had to go 65-30.
65% groundwater, 35% surface.
Yes, right.
Correct. Fiscal year average.
When I add the numbers up, they seem to be low.
You mean groundwater low or surface water?
Surface water low.
Correct. So we give a min and a max that every entity can take. And in FY 23 we did. Conroe's been using a lower amount up until June 1st. They've been hovering around 2.5 million. Starting June 1st, they've actually requested to be 4.5 to 5 million a day. So those numbers going forward, you're going to see a lot higher. On that same note, we also did this morning send out to the 7 participants receiving surface water saying, hey, there's 92 days left in the year. You're allowed this many gallons. You have this many remaining. Just FYI, if we reach that amount, you get no more surface water.
Well, why is that?
Right now, it's up to the GRP review. So the GRP review committee approved the budget along with the board that said you can produce this much and spend this much money. Right. And so if we're going to exceed those expenses, we need to go back to the review committee and allow them to vote to allow us to continue operating at whatever level it may be.
This happened back in June, July
July of last year.
My struggle with is that you have a pipeline, and the pipeline has a 55% debt. So, of a dollar, 55% is debt. And another, let's just say another 20% is salaries and wages, and the other 25% roughly is variable costs, chemicals.
Okay.
So if you're like at the end of June, if you were at that end of the year, to me, if you exceed budget, you're actually making a lot more money because it's only costing you 25 cents to the dollar to produce the water, but you're getting 75 cents because you don't have to pay capital. You already accumulated the year's capital charge. So why wouldn't we? When I was in a business, I was ahead of budget. I cut prices and sold more because a lot more of the dollar trickled into my profit.
Well, and if you recall, the GRP review committee did allow us to continue operating the surface water plant at a limited rate, 12 million gallons a day. And that was passed, that was for 30 days beyond the budgeted.
I have to ask those guys that.
Now they have authorized us to look into providing surface water to other GRP participants that are not receiving surface water. So we're looking at what that rate might be. And we're also looking at, okay, if we get another situation like last year, what would the rate be to just continue producing surface water? Now, we won't have the answer before the end of the summer, but we are working for an answer.
I kind of struggle, why would you ever discontinue or reduce producing surface water if your pipeline has the capacity way beyond what we're doing now? I mean, to me, it pump, and reduce groundwater.
Currently,
I understand why the pricing structure.
okay,
I mean, I understand we've got 42 cents, it probably costs you 80 cents in chemicals. Yes.
well, let's back up. Lone Star changed their surface water or groundwater rules,
Right.
where they increased the DSC, defined future condition. So there is no restriction on groundwater pumping, and there's no mandatory use of surface water. And so our GRP participants have a right to say whether we want to incur more expense by producing beyond the budget. And so we're gathering numbers so we can go back to them and say, here's what the numbers are. Is this something you all want to allow us to do going forward?
Once you get to a point where you hit that threshold, where you have to have another carbon filter.
Yes.
That's a large incremental cost.
Yeah, but, you know, again, I want that forward, that carbon filter, but, you know, it's not like you know, it's kind of a linear system, meaning they have 8 filters, they have 4 sets. And if one runs out, they still got 3, and it's just a matter of paying the budget and you buy additional in lines of life. So I don't see, I thought the same thing you just said, and then as I've got to understand the plant better.
Well, there's a threshold. And Chris knows this a lot better than I do. Every time each GAC change is worth about 3 million gallons a day. So if you go from 13 MGD to 16 or 20 MGD, you just added 1 to 2 GAC change. And so the costs do increase.
Well,
Can we move this to an agenda for next month? We'll have a full, yeah, thank you. We'll put it as an agenda item for next month, and perhaps we can do a deeper dive into it. Good.
Any other questions?
Go ahead.
Page 26 of the packet. There's an entry there, accounts receivable uncollected, $7.2 million.
For the actual. for
Trustee Gainer, where are you,
The
please?
actual for- Yeah, oh no, I was gonna go there. Does that include interest?
Yes. Well, let me verify. You know, if that includes interest.
Yes.
Just to make sure.
Go ahead. Good one.
Accounts receivable and
No,
collected.
that's 29.
Yes, sir, right here.
I don't see another interest account. No, there's some gap fees for that interest around.
Yeah, and it rolls into the next bar, that number, 29 million.
29 million does penalties and interest.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
We can
The bottom,
some
small
resolution
print at
of
the
that.
bottom.
Yeah, the footnote says it includes interest.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, the footnote says it includes interest and penalty on tax due.
Oh, yeah, the one that had the 3 stars, says total past due receivable plus 60 days, that was source of my question.
Right.
Are there penalties and interest included in
And it's a-
that
Yes.
particular number?
Yes. And late fees,
If, well, whatever.
because there's penalties and there's late fees and there's interest.
All right.
That's a snapshot as of April 30th. Has anything changed on that? Is it still 29, almost 7?
It's down. You can tell.
I think you've heard me talk a little bit about a Rule 11 letter that SJRA negotiated between Quadvet and Woodland Oak. That was done so that they could appeal the most recent December 2022 court decision that said our contract was valid and incontestable. But one stipulation to that Rule 11 letter was those 2 entities had to get current with us. So we did receive a payment. We received 2 payments, one from Quadvest, one from Woodland Oaks. They got them. So somewhere around $12.5 million. And that's in the bank account, and and before you ask, we'll tell you, we're evaluating what to do next with those dollars.
And it's not an escrow.
And your excess funds, yes.
The only escrow we have is on debt service.
You know, you never disappoint, David. Yeah. Okay, anything else?
Yes, Chris, there's an article in the Courier yesterday about fees that were paid by the city of Conroe that were paid to Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District. And there's a couple of references to San Jacinto River Authority in here that left me concerned. I'll read the quick passages. In 2022, when the region experienced drought conditions that increased usage, the River Authority limited surface water, forcing the city and other large water users to pump more water from underground. And we're all familiar with the drought and how some of us adjusted, and I think all went back. Can you tell this board what our experience was for the San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division and what our penalty was vis-a-vis this blurb?
I can say, yes, I can. So this conversation ties back to the one that David had earlier. In August of 22, actually back up, July of 22, the GRP Review Committee voted to restrict the GRP plant to 12 million gallons a day. And so when they did that for that entire month, the Woodlands received, I want to say 6 to 7 million gallons a day of surface water. But then the other participants received, fair share from there. I think Conroe was 3 or 4 million, if that or so. And so, of course, when you're doing that, you're in the middle of drought and you have reduced surface water, you have more groundwater pumpage. So the River Authority, we knew we were going to be over on our permits. We filed an application to amend the permit by 1.5 billion gallons in August. Went to November, went to the Lone Star Board where they pulled it from the agenda because they said they had conflicting information. Turns out we had made the request, or not made the request, we had asked the question of what process is needed to remove that or to change that 1.5 to 750 million gallons. Because, right, when you do it in August, you're making a guess. When come October, it's like, oh, we need to refine that a little bit. So long story short, we did not amend our permit. If we would have amended the permit in the year, the fees would have been at 8.5 cents per 1,000 gallons. Now, Lone Star has a disincentive fee of $6 per 1,000 gallons. The River Authority pumped over, give or take, 600 million gallons. They're a lot. I think it's 543 million and change. Therefore, Lone Star sent us a letter and said, hey, your penalty was going to be roughly $1.75 million. However, considering good compliance and the drought conditions, they reduced that 1.7 down to 200,000 and change. So we have not paid that just yet. Right now, we're investigating to make sure that we were treated the same as all other entities, that, calculations are correct and everybody got the same treatment.
That would be my question. What was the ratio of city of Conroe's over pumpage versus us, for example, and why did they pay 300,000 and we paid 200,000?
I know we did an open records request. We have that information. I think we got it yesterday. I have not gone through it to see what their pumpage amount was, and we got the letters and the invoices, but I can definitely.
But you're on the right track, and I appreciate your research on it. So good, thank you.
Further
No other
questions?
updates, or any other questions?
Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Meeks. Mr. Shackelford. Agenda item 8, receive update on Spring Creek detention study. Dan, is that you? Are you?
And
You sure? Reluctantly,
did want to go back to the wastewater
Oh.
strategic plan.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Just let everybody know, we have been working very diligently with our consultant. We haven't brought a lot of information or new presentations to you over the past couple of months, but I do assure you that we have been progressing, and it is going well. On June 27th in the evening, we have an all bud director meeting plan to present an update of the wastewater strategic plan, the phase 2 that we've been going through, and our methodology and approach and results, essentially a recommendation of what the capacity is for the plant. So I highly encourage y'all to participate in that and also encourage your fellow mud directors to come to that June 27th meeting. So that's the update.
Will that be at the training center over at wastewater treatment plant 1?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. Moving on to Spring Creek, I do not have much of an update there. One small update, but it is good news, is we have started some further discussions with the solar company on possible options to coexist out there. So that is very recent. Not a whole lot to present at this point in time, but it's an encouraging step. And we do anticipate additional meetings and discussions with them. And we did, I think you probably already received the update, but back in early May, we had what we feel was a very successful public meeting here at the Woodlands Township. So that is all I have for Spring Creek.
That's great information about the openness that has been experienced with Solar One. I believe that's the name of it, isn't it? Something like that. That's really good. Very positive.
So we'll continue to find you updates as we progress.
Thank you.
Yes.
Agenda item number 9, consider an act on additional research by San Jacinto River Authority for AC water lines. Mr. Meeks, good evening.
So I'll start this by, we asked for this item to be an action item on the agenda. However, we are not expecting any action tonight. We're presenting information and some general thoughts. But in case y'all were inclined to take action, we asked for it to be on there if you want to have the ability to. So prior to the meeting, I passed out 2 documents, small sheet and then a big sheet. So I'll walk through this and explain a couple things. So this big sheet is very hard to read. It's hard to get on the page. I'm going to see if I can format it better on the MUDs next week, but I'm also going to give it to Shelley so she can post it on the Google Drive. So we can all see it in low. What this document is this is on a 10-year project plan. Okay. So this, on the left-hand side, you're going to see our project number, the project name, which is just now seen as a typo. But it breaks it up into the 10, 15, and 20-year proposals that we have presented at the Alderman meeting back. What this is here for is, one, to show y'all how we kind of looked at spreading the projects out. So you go down each project, you see the base cost, and then you see what the inflated cost would be for design and or construction as it gets moved out. Down towards the bottom, or actually on the second page, this is water and wastewater, by the way. On the bottom of the second, or that's the middle of the second page, you'll see where we have the contingency at 30% and the inflation at 3% per year. Okay. The main point of this is also these colored boxes that you see. There were some comments that we have received of how are you going to get all the work done if you get $200 million in bonds at once. Wanted to reiterate that this is not one bond sale. This is multiple bond sales over a 10, 15, or 20-year period. So when we're looking at the project plan, the project plan is for the funding of the projects. The actual work takes about 3 years longer than the plan. So a 10-year project plan, funded in 10 years, but the work's done in 13. 15-year plan, work's done in 18, 20-year plan, done 23 years. So more information for y'all. Same as everything that you've seen before. When you look at this compared to the presentation in May, those numbers were rounded up for ease. These are a little bit more spot on.
You read this 10 to 15 year, I see three, some columns have 3 numbers. What's this is really a 10-year plan. You're proposing, not a 15, not a 20 year.
We have proposed a 10-year plan. The 15 and the 20 were additional options at the request of some directors to say, well, what would happen if you had spread it out? So trying to present information that we can readily available and easy to do. If we wanted to ask that?
David, did you answer your question? How to read that?
I does.
Okay. Next document is the shorter document or the smaller document, not short by any means. So this is These are 16 questions that we have received from two MUD directors on the project plan since y'all MUD meeting. This is actually the written questions that we received from all the directors, so we've only received these 16. So what we've done is, we got with our consultant, of course, myself, Dan and his group, and then the consultant that worked on the original study got together, and we answered the questions the best we could. So Dan's gonna help me here with some of the technical items, but I want you to know, as we went through, we've answered a lot of these questions. 9, 10, and 11 are not fully answered. To answer those, on the back page, there's a table. It's an estimate of 175,000 answer two of them. And there's a question on modeling, and that is unknown. Estimates could be anywhere from 25 to 100,000, just depending on the level of detail that is asked to go. So this is why we're not asking for any actions tonight. One, we have no money in the budget for this in FY23, none in FY24.
So who was asking the 16 questions?
The participants of the Alma meeting.
But two people in particular said we want our 16 questions answered, right?
Right.
So you're spending a lot of time on these questions. I think it's fair that we know who's specifically tasking you with these 16 questions.
So the first 11 come from Brad Hawk. The last 5 come from Peter Heck.
Was the second question?
Heckler. So we feel that we've answered as much as we could at this point. What we try not to do is spend a lot of time, as Kyle was saying, going down various rabbit trails for 1 or 2 directors, because obviously what we do is pay for all the MUDs, but simpler things like showing 15 and 20 years takes an hour or 2 to try to knock those out. This did not take too much time or money, and I have those numbers at the office. I forgot to bring them, but what I wanted to do is bring Dan up and see if he could talk a little bit more to y'all about items 9, 10, and 11. Because one of my questions, and I think one of the general questions is, okay, if we go through and spend $200,000, what information is it going to give, and is it going to help y'all move the needle to make a decision there?
No, I appreciate that, Chris. And Chris is right. You know, it's, if we go through additional study, analysis, evaluation of the data that we have, you know, is it going to move that needle? Is it going to provide a higher level of confidence to y'all that we are making the right decision?
Do we know what we're talking about, the determination of when to do the AC water lines specifically? I don't think that was.
That's the general subject.
The general, what he's covering right now is correct. And the question was, should it not be studied further to identify exactly what years those lines should be?
Is 50 arbitrary or?
Whatever, right, exactly. So the question was, should there be more evaluation, a more thorough evaluation than the evaluation that's been done by the consultant? And that's what he's answering.
I'm not going through this whole memo. This is provided in all the individual MUD packets for discussion further at the meetings. But I just wanted to bring y'all's attention to questions 9, 10, and 11. So question number 9 is on page 3. This is where questions regarding, you know, what data, historic data do we have on previous line breaks? So SRA has line break data that goes back to approximately 2000. But not every single little specific detail was captured. So, you know, we are kind of just to some extent stuck with what data was captured at that point in time. We can't go back and just make up that data or know exactly a pinpoint of where that line break might have occurred or did occur. So it's something to where we are limited by the data we have. And is that data enough to get additional value out of additional analysis of that? You know, I will say our crews strive to, as quickly as possible, to get those lines back in service. So that is their main focus. Their main goal is to get that line back in service. Question number 9 is tied to the estimated cost that we work with our consultant on is the approximate budget for $25,000 in 6 to 8 weeks to do further water line break analysis. So this is looking at, is there a trend that is occurring over time of the water line breaks? Is there, something besides age and other consequences of failure related to increasing time or increasing age? So there is a desktop analysis that can be looked into to further evaluate the break data that we have. Going on to question 10, which starts on page 3 and is furthermore on page 4. This is tied to what is increased breaks mean. So the increased breaks would have showed up on one of the slides that was presented at the MUD meeting. And taking that terminology and how does that compare to consequences beyond cost? So in the spreadsheet that Chris handed out, cost impact is apparent. If you approach the replacement of the AC water line at a slower pace and extend that out to 15 or 20 years, there is going to be an additional cost with just the inflation and escalation over time. So what else beyond that cost factor could be, additional consequences for delaying or approaching the AC water line replacements at a slower pace? So the response to this question is a little bit more advanced desktop analysis using existing data on the increased likelihood for break over increasing time. Are we going to be experiencing more major breaks or more multiple catastrophic breaks that have more extensive consequences to businesses, to traffic, to other things other than just straight cost? And then try to define a little bit more individual spots along our system in line where there might be impacts to customers, and is there higher consequences of failure in certain areas? Is this serving a residential area, and if we have a break at X point, what is the impact there? Or is this serving a line that's going to a hospital or a dialysis center or school? And I will say SRA has an asset management plan that we go through a risk assessment ourselves. And we've had consultants help us with that. And that includes consequence of failure, similar factors, but it isn't down to the minute level of each and every point along every line. So this effort is approximately $150,000 and could take 6 to 9 months to drill down to a more detailed level, utilizing break data we have and looking at those other consequences of failure that may occur if we were to approach at a slower pace. One last one I do want to go through is question number 11 on page 4. Again, this is tied to what are the possible consequences of failure, looking at these different project schedules at 10, 15, 20 years. But this is going to a whole nother level of possibly utilizing some sort of predictive software, which it does exist out there. There is these softwares that use certain methodologies within the industry. They have improved over time, utilizing different artificial intelligence algorithms. But I will say at the end of the day, those are still a model with assumptions, with uncertainty, and are only as good as the quantity and quality of data is inputted into them. So a question that we have is the quality of our break data or other data that we have enough to come up with a model of any sort of confidence? As far as I know, we have not spoke with other public entities, cities, et cetera, that have utilized this. So that's something I can't really speak on today is, kind of that benchmarking. Who else has ever utilized a software or something like this before? Like Chris mentioned, we don't have defined cost right now on that. We have reached out to some of the software providers, but there is a cost to obtain the software. There's an annual cost to own the software. And then there's a cost to the consultant to even build that model utilizing the software. So I think that's something we're going to further work on to try to nail down what that potential cost may be if we were to go some sort of predictive modeling side. Data that would be going into that? And is there enough there to benefit from, providing some sort of a model? So those three questions roll into, on page 6, a table showing 3 different tasks. The approximate budget and schedule that we're estimating at this point in time, if we were to do further analysis on it. But Chris, I'll pass that to you if there's anything else you want to add or.
Well, I do want to add one thing, but I'll add it after.
Okay. We were thinking around talking this afternoon, kind of thinking, okay, if this wasn't sufficient, what they just explained to you wasn't sufficient to get you predictive data. The other option is we've got roughly 50 miles of water line, wholesale water line pipe, all sizes, 12-inch all the way up to 30-inch. You could go in and take a core sample out of every pipe, every half mile, and that's roughly be 110 samples, and then have them tested. That could easily run $2.5 to $3.5 million by the time you cut the line down, dig the line up, hope you don't hit anything going down to open the hole, cut a coupon out, put a full circle clamp back on the line, pressure it up, put it back in service and fill the hole, and then have the coupon tested and then somebody do the testing and the analysis. That would be the worst case scenario in pursuing data to answer the question of when should a certain line be replaced?
So how many samples is enough? I mean, do you have to get 110 or can you do 10?
Well, there is one other option. You all have heard us talk about the town center water line. Our goal is, we're finishing up engineering now. Our goal is to put that out for bid either late fall of 24 or spring of 25. That's 15,000 linear feet of pipe that we're going to be replacing with new pipe. We could, as part of that project, grab some samples and have them tested. Just kind of see what things look like.
Is it same vintage as most of this other AC pipe?
Well, that's the concern.
That's older pipe, isn't it?
It's about mid. It's higher on the criticality because of what it feeds. So it's actually a little bit newer than the rest of it. But one thing is to keep in mind, if you do pull up town center, even bits of it, and you have that tested, you're only getting that line, right? And you're only getting that pipe. So if something was installed on North Millbend, you shouldn't always relate the two together because this different pipe could be different manufacturer. Everything's different.
What year was that pipe put in?
I'd have to go and double check. We had a map, I want to say somewhere around 96 to 98. I'm sorry, 76 to 78. Because it stopped around 82, 83 or so. But from the modeling to, we've done acoustic testing before, coupon samples, all the stuff is looking at the pipe itself, right? The pipe may be good, but how is it installed? How does it move when the ground moves? How's the bedding? A lot of the issues we're having on Woodlands Parkway, line's supposed to last forever day, pipe is fine. It's the install method and the lack of bedding. So these are options that you can look at and we will gladly do. Just keep in mind, it is only giving you this much of the full piece of the pipe. There's additional things like weather. When Harvey comes through and it gets real wet, ground moves a lot. AC pipe does not like that. When it gets very dry, starts to move. AC pipe does not like that. So just keep in mind, if you go this route, you'll get information, but there's still additional information there you can use. So, yes.
Where did the 50-year pipe come from?
50-year life is an industry standard in this area. We talked to our consultant LAN about that, I think Tuesday, because they had showed a report buried no longer. And it said in the southeast, this area, should have an 80-year lifespan. I said, okay, we've been using 50 based off of everything we've seen from Houston and the soils in the area, the acidity and everything else. And they confirmed for this general area, 50 is it. When AWWA looks at it, they're on very high scale and say, generally speaking, it should be like, so
Like what?
it should be at this area at 80 years
80 years.
is what AWWA said.
And obviously, that's why I sent that letter. So, yeah, I've I'm not an expert at this, so I'm just fooling around looking for that. And I've seen, the guys that make the pipe to those societies, that's 7 years. Others said the average age of this pipe in the US is 65 miles. Another piece of that, I need to read it first. So I would like to see the engineering house has literature. I'd like to read that literature. Because I think, if you read your documents, I mean, really, everything begins with the 50-year assumption. Right? It all begins with that. Even in your document, it says the BRE score, which is really almost a subjective score, is really not driving this project. It's the 50-year life assumption. So I think, we could go back and do the standards. I'm interested in 50-year life. And, it may solve itself with your document here. You say it's a 10-year plan, 20-year plan, 30-year plan. But I've been hunting for, a peer review.
Well, and we're chasing, I know Connie is working with one of the engineers to chase down some of the cities that have pipe that's 50+ years old to get their experience, find out what their basis for.
You don't have the data, you don't have everything. But as I read your documents, and I've not quite read them all twice, it's 150 pages. It's a lot of detail, but the thing to be driving this decision is that assumption.
And
I think we need to nail that assumption.
a lot of the, searching for the word, but a lot of these associations or technical societies, they'll issue a design life or service life, but that's under ideal conditions where they could be very specific about the bedding, but very specific about the backfill, very, very specific about how the collars and the pipe are joined. We're talking, what's out here in the real world is not how it's installed compared to the lab. So there is some, I'll say, existing conditions, existing contractors that they didn't put the sand bedding in that is recommended by every governmental entity in installing a water line. You're supposed to put 6 to 12 inches below, 6 to 12 inches above, to allow for some movement. And we're not finding sand around this pipe. So that does factor in.
So will you share that data? What you get? I mean, it's the report implies you already have it. At one point it's written in the document that you have all this information. Maybe it's filed away by 40 pages.
But the other, I think in taking this one more step, the other concern that was expressed was, are we approving a 10-year project budget or are we approving a 1-year budget? And it's 1-year budget. You're approving a 10-year project plan that has some flexibility to move projects in and out as necessary, because we update that project plan annually based on what's trending kind of sounds bad, but what's occurring during the prior 12 months. And if you don't have a plan, it's hard to tell you all what to expect in the way of expenses going forward. No different than what you might do at home. Yes.
Chris mentioned there was 50 miles of pipeline. Is that what you're saying throughout the Woodlands?
Correct.
And the 15 miles of pipeline in town center, is that included in the 50?
It is it's 3 miles, 15,000 linear feet. So the 3 miles is included in the 50.
Yeah.
So 3 miles.
And most of the AC pipe, and I think you've heard us say this before, it's on the east of Cochran's Crossing, coming back towards 45.
Oh, okay.
Most everything west is PVC.
That's just yours.
Yes, that's
East
just
of
the
Congress
wholesale.
Crossing or east of Grogan's Mill?
Cochran's Crossing. I originally thought it was Grogan's Mill, but it's a little further west.
Well, it's Woodlands Parkway.
You said that you really didn't come with an ask
I did not come with an ask. I just-
or an agenda item for ACT. action.
And let me just add a little bit of clarification to this. We receive requests like this occasionally here and there. And so, like I said, we'll try to do it. However, this is tied to some big dollars. And so since there is some directors that did ask for funds to be expended, that approval comes from y'all since it's not in the budget. So that's the reason the action item was on the budget if y'all chose to move forward.
And
I'd like to make a motion, and we can discuss it, that this issue be presented to the MUDs at the upcoming meetings next week. Now, I don't know how much data you can give, but we don't have any money. That's not in our budget. And it should be in my opinion, we can further discuss this if I get a second, that it's the fiduciary responsibility of each director to speak on behalf of the necessity to gain this additional information and the expenditure of, what is it? $175,000.
Right.
So,
the modeling.
Yeah, can I ask one question? The modeling, the companies and that you have out there, how sophisticated are these machine learned AI programs? I mean, in weather right now, the modeling is just incredible how accurate they can become. And you're talking about all the variables out there of the sand and the age and the all the other predictions that come in. Is the technology with whatever firms are out there that can do these modeling sophisticated enough to, if you paid for it, generate a good answer for us, or a good enough answer that we would be able to take this and then turn around and sell our constituents of why this is a good and prudent expenditure of money?
I answer it in a roundabout way and apologize. And then they can slap me on the head and they can stop. It's a lot of it's dependent upon the person entering the data. You know, and has somebody counseled them as to what the number should be for that?
But I mean, is there a firm out there specifically? I mean, there are firms out there that address web. Okay, that's one of it. So we've got subject matter experts here that are just not somebody in Bangalore just putting in data, right? They're specifically looking to get this. Even if this was to be a little bit expensive, predictive modeling, what they use in medicine, and I mean, just the fields are just expanding because you know the AI support is just so good, you know, and to just blue sky it, even if it's 1 year, 5 years down the road, just to be able to say, you know, all the variables and stuff that we plugged into this is the outcome. And even if I know it says the predictive modeling, the budget to be determined, I would be really interested in knowing what that would cost. And I would think something like that would be pretty appealing to be able to get everything down into just really easy to digest terms, then turn around and push it out to all of our constituents. And if it doesn't exist, that's okay. Well, then we go to plan B and everything else of doing, you know, the sampling and that. But there's some outstanding modeling programs that are out there. And if there is such a company that does this specifically to our area, I think maybe that's worth exploring.
So I will say, yes, there is softwares out there. There is experts that do that modeling across the world, across the United States. At this point, you know, we have started to reach out to them. We have not had enough time to really get a lot of feedback on cost, on the viability of our system and our data producing a competent model. You know, that is something we are going to continue to look at. We are going to continue those discussions to find what those costs may be. And maybe it's something we look at a longer term. They may say, all right, well, you need to start collecting data on X, Y, and Z.
Because that with AI models and that everything is linear and variable. So as conditions change, you can input that into the model and it evolves with you. And that could be very helpful going forward.
But I agree, we can continue to look at that and then present back to you on, you know, here's what the cost and the long-term cost and annual maintenance could be. You know, is that, do we feel it's bad?
Yeah.
And I'd like, from the engineering side, I'd like to get some more benchmarking data, not just from the software providers, but
Right.
also other entities in Texas,
Yeah.
in US that
Yeah.
have utilized.
You're gonna spend this kind of money, having this kind of backup to go back and to talk to people about it and say, yeah, but this is what we're looking at. Because otherwise it's a hard sell because it's not broken. Why do we need to fix it? But people are savvy now to predictive modeling because it's used in so many other industries.
We're happy to do it.
Yeah, I would consider this discussion. If there's a second to the motion to bring it back to the, when we get to discussion, okay? If we get, maybe we won't get a second. Thank you. Is there a second to the? Motion is to bring this information, have the decision made at the mud level, and then come back.
I don't say. I don't want a decision made this next week at the mud level.
Okay,
Well,
So I won't second.
wasn't
Okay.
the intent, pardon me for interrupting, wasn't the intent for them to instruct their trustee
right,
representative to come back to the July board meeting to make the vote?
right. That was where I was going
Yeah.
with that. If,
So I'll second it for you.
okay,
Yeah.
so then that would allow the, so we have a motion, we have a second. Further discussion, trustee Smith?
I'm just wondering, just grab 7th page, slide 19. So that data there, what form is it in? Is it a spreadsheet?
That's the Excel data that we sent you. When you did your,
You didn't, but you included an actually all breakage. Is this all breakage? Here we go.
no, that's only AC lines. We went through all the breakage and then we said, okay, there's one, here's
So
one.
what you sent me was the AC front breakage only,
No, it was all lines.
all lines.
So all we did to make that graph was we took that same spreadsheet, we looked at it and said, that's an AC line, put a one here. That's an AC line, put a one here, to develop that spreadsheet. We don't have a separate spreadsheet that only shows AC lines.
That's only 2015 and beyond, correct?
2015, yeah, for 7 years.
I'm trying to understand what we expect to get out of the modeling. Does it mean we'll never have to replace the lines? We're gonna wait till they break and then replace them? Or when is the appropriate time to replace them? What are you expecting to get out of modeling? Additional?
Predictable breakage. That's what I understand.
Okay, so now what do you do?
Well, I don't, you asked what separate question. I was just giving you
What
answer
do
that
you
I
do with it?
understood, but yeah.
What
That's
do you do
all
with that
good
information?
discussion.
How do you make a decision to build a line or not based on predictable breakage of this? When you don't know who the hell the contractor was, whether they followed your specs or not, it's under the ground and we can't see it.
And there's a 20-year window now that we're learning if what's considered a 50-year pipe is now a 70-year pipe or an 80-year pipe possibly. So there's now a 20-year window when you have more time.
I mean, you're never gonna know. It's down under the ground. We don't see it. It wasn't the same contractor every time by any means. It was the low bid over 30 years of 40 years of construction. I don't know what your model's gonna tell you.
My comment's not going to the model, but, we're talking about 16 to 17 million a year in pipe expenditures. Right now, we have a breakage cost for the whole system of about, what, 100, less than 250 a year? Across the whole system. It's about 10%.
Check and see.
So we're not spending a lot of money on breakage. We're not. Now, I'm making the statement, I don't know how to fit that into the discussion right
Yeah.
now. But, it's not like the whole place is falling down.
Right. So you're saying there's no hurry on any.
There's no hurry, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I've been
Trustee
hearing for a couple of years about Woodlands Parkway having issues, a lot of issues. Line along. Go ahead, Art.
Yeah, I think we need a logical plan that says we're gonna replace our pipes and we have a contingency plan for breakage. For example, years ago, Mud 40 and San Jacinto River Authority spent $500,000 because a pipe was laid without proper bedding in what's basically quick mud. Okay, and it just floated away and had a big hole in the street. And we had an engineer design a replacement of the pipe, and then we had to abort that because he found that there wasn't a good bedding for it. So I think you've addressed the point that we have a lot of unknowns, and we did not have proper engineers who we hired, by the way, to see that it was built according to specifications. And you're finding all sorts of stuff in the Woodlands where if you have a wet year, you're gonna have pipes sink. If you have a dry year, you're gonna have pipes because they didn't do it properly. Okay, and when we had the wedge mud fiasco, I asked Mike Page if we could go back and sue the engineer who was supposed to say that it was built according to spec. He said, no, it's past the statute of limitations. So most of our pipes are past the statute of limitations. We should probably have a plan that says we have a plan to replace them. We have a contingency plan if something breaks that we didn't think we thought was gonna last 20 years and it didn't. And I don't think we need, this is not a really, to me, it is a very simple thing that you have already laid out for us. Okay? Now, that's 1 out of 50 mud directors' opinion.
Further discussions, questions? Yes, sir.
I'm getting the sense, this is the prelude to analysis paralysis. And we will, irrespective of, well, models, and there's obviously limited data to, or not in the right form, we will never get to a position of certainty with regard to the underground infrastructure, period. So in my opinion, in the event that these minor studies go ahead to their specific dimension, I think we're going to end up in the same place. Okay. Some point, we're going to have to say, these are our bounds of uncertainty. However, the consequences of failure are so much larger because we will fail in the fundamental requirements level of service. Okay, so that's where I'm
So
thinking.
we've gone through this exercise of, do we want to be reactive to things breaking, or do we want to proactively replace things when we know it's getting close? And the other thing that we've talked about as an organization is, what level of service do we want? Do we always want water outages, because the stuff is getting old, or do we want to anticipate that so that we don't have tons of random outages throughout the system and replace it a little sooner than maybe, 70 years or 80 years or whatever? And so we, maybe we need to go back and decide, all right, do we want to be proactive and replace stuff ahead of time? Do we want to maintain a very high level of service, or are we happy now with a lower level of service and more breaks? But I think you guys are going with the, with this proactive, we want good service. We don't want a lot of water breaks. We don't want a lot of customer complaints. And, so I think that's what you delivered, in your original plan. And if we want something different, then we need to give you guys that guidance.
Further discussion? Just to recap, the motion as it was intended was for the MUDs to authorize this expenditure or potential expenditure of $175,000 for further study, because that has to come from their budgets. Okay, we don't have I don't feel as though this board has the fiduciary authority to make that call on behalf of the MUDs. So that would be up to each MUD director and the president, their comprehension and questions that arrive from the discussions that is delivered next week by SJRA staff and others.
What if we get half the board saying yes, half the MUD say yes, we want it, half the MUD say we don't?
I have no idea.
Majority rules?
I don't know.
Well, I think it does.
I'd like to get legal counsel's opinion on this board's authority as far as.
It's very simple. It's in the formation of the JPA that the directors can act, the trustees can act on behalf of their MUD. That's very simple.
Harley's correct. McIntosh, that budget decisions are made, have the authority for budget approval is delegated from the MUDs to the trustees. We have, to Bob's point, formalized a process to have the MUDs give direction via a vote to their trustee on how they want to come and vote on that item. It sounds like, Bob, what you're talking about is implementing that process as a modification of what was previously approved, because right now, each of you 10 trustees don't know what the rest of your board thinks, so you would be acting on your own. Now, do you have the legal authority to act on your own? Yes, you do, but understandably, most directors don't want to act to authorize expenditure of district funds without knowing what your remainder of your directors feel on that topic. So I think that's what you're looking to do. Is
That's precisely what the intent is. Thank you.
Exactly.
This meeting is open to all directors who are interested.
I don't understand the relevance of that comment.
To be here.
If
I mean, they can
we
be
have-
in the
whoever-
audience?
Hmm?
You mean in the audience?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
The residents, sure.
Just one quick question. So if this presentation were to be made to the individual MUDs and the individual MUD was to give direction to the trustee to authorize the expenditure of $175,000 based on these couple of answers to the questions. So how would that be dispersed amongst the MUDs? Is it just a pro rata share? Is it an equal share? How would a MUD pay?
So it would be just like any other budgeted expense of the river. So if we come back to the trustees would vote pursuant to their authority under the JPA, now Woodlands Water Agreement, to authorize the river authority to spend those funds. River authority would spend those using its funding for the MUDs from wholesale retail rates and wholesale water and sewer rates, that each of the MUDs would pay a pro rata share based on whatever their usage was.
And on the predictive modeling where it says TBD, you know, so do we have another vote when you guys determine what that would cost? Is that part of, are you guys still working on figuring out a price to put in there? So it'd be another vote.
So really, if I'm speaking on behalf of my board, and if Brian says I have the right to speak on behalf of my board, I'm gonna say, I don't want to do this at this time. Because spending $175,000 for something we're not sure that's gonna be an answer to our problems at this point. Plus, we may add more to it later on if we have to get the predictive modeling costs, although it may be a very useful tool. I just don't see the need to spend the money at this
You don't know
time.
what it is. You don't know what it's gonna cost.
No, it could be $1 million. How do we know that? You know what I mean? So. To me, it doesn't seem like it's
Well,
like we should.
it's very important that we get the recommendation from the experts at JPA, at the San Jacinto River Authority and our general manager. And I haven't heard those recommendations.
That's what I'm saying. It's a little too soon, in my opinion.
That's why we hire people who are professionals to give us recommendations based on professional judgment.
I'll just add one, maybe two things. When we're talking about approving, excuse me, the river authority to do these projects, expend their funds, we do not have funds in the budget nor the R&R to cover these items. So if y'all say, yes, please go forward, we're gonna follow it up with the question of how do we fund it? Because I don't have the money. Now it could be a rate adjustment. I'll get with Haley and see by next week to see if it is a rate adjustment, how much the rate come up. We could also cut something in the amount of basically the same to fund it. But right now I do not have any funds set aside for this. I don't have enough what if money set aside for it. The second item is on the item of recommendation. I'll give you mine. I agree with Neil entirely. You can study stuff to death. You're never going to get all the information you're looking for. So if y'all decide this is worthwhile, yeah, we'll definitely go forward and get it done. But I entirely think that when you study something, you get more questions. Then you study that, and you get more questions, and you study that, you get more questions. So I don't like studies.
Okay, did we have a recommendation from our general manager?
I've looked at this in depth. I'm not too familiar, although there's new information coming out about some of the predictive modeling stuff. I know about as much as you've heard as well. I've done some research. I had the same concerns that I've heard tonight, which is if we go in and do, one of these other two options, number one, my first question was, do we even have the data to even make that valuable? And if the answer is yes, we do have the data to make that valuable. Okay, well, what is the possible movement that would even happen? Are we going to be told that the line that was identified in 2028 can now be done in 2032 or 2058 or never? The answer is probably not never. So what is it going to move the needle any has been my question. And I'm not sure that task 1 and task 2 will do that.
Okay, your recommendation
question right
is
now.
that this time, your recommendation is do not fund it. Is that what I hear?
No, my recommendation is, I don't know, I'm not familiar enough with the data to know if those two analyses will give you the information you're looking for.
Then I would like to know what the professional opinion is of the people who are the professionals of San Jacinto River Authority and the professionals that we have hired here at the Woodlands Water.
I will say, though, that I have asked the desktop study that's been done thus far by the firm that was hired by STRA. One of my suggestions would be to go to those folks and say, if you had additional monies and you had additional data, what difference could that make? And have them answer it. If they're the ones, because they're the ones that did the original analysis that got us to this.
I can guess what.
Right. Or is there another alternative in terms of a professional that does this for a living every day and they have a better crystal ball? I mean, I think to Neil's point, how specific are you going to get the answer to? There's not going to be an absolute answer to this. It will be subjective no matter which one of these things you do. It's just how comfortable are you going to do that? The question that I hear everybody saying is, how comfortable can I get to represent it to my constituents? That's what I'm hearing.
What about another measurement? If we're spending $250,000 a year on fixing brakes, what's the threshold? Is it $1 million a year on fixing brakes? Is it 20 brakes, 20, shutdowns in the systems? Maybe there's some other thresholds, besides just the age of the pipe. If we're getting X number of brakes and it's costing X amount of dollars, that's go.
Other cities do use other metrics. The brakes per mile, brakes per 100 miles is one of the common ones used, but kind of one of the things in the
budget. What their budget, how much are they gonna spend?
Right, where they are, how big they are, who's out of service. I don't know. They don't pay attention to those. It's strictly how many times does it break. Hospitals out of water, doesn't matter. So there's things to think about, right? The Woodlands generally doesn't have any leaks overnight, right? And so they break, we fix it, break, they fix it, So just things to consider is, do you want more breaks before you have an action, proactive versus reactive? All metrics, all level of service, we can definitely track and look into.
Where I'm concerned is somebody has to pay for this. And, if we want to take the fiduciary responsibility away from the directors, that's fine. I'll withdraw the motion. You'll withdraw the second, and then we can vote on it here. That's fine. But somebody's got to pay.
Well, I don't think we have to vote on anything tonight, right?
No, we don't have to vote on it tonight.
Yeah.
And we haven't got a yes or no from the professionals we've hired to give us the advice. And I want that. Because that's why we hired him. Okay? I don't want them to say, we need to study it further, we need to do this, we need to do that. If you want to study it further, say yes, okay? Do you want to spend the money to do it? And next meeting, I would like to have the opinion of the professionals we've hired as whether it is cost effective to go forward and spend the money. Yes or no?
So until that comes back, then nothing will really proceed forward. Is that correct? Is there any, as the point was made, it doesn't have to be voted on tonight or this week, but everything kind of stops awaiting this next issuance of an professional opinion.
That opinion will decide how we move forward on the replacement of the water line. It does not change anything in the FY24 budget.
Okay.
It causes a little bit of a delay.
I think that opinion still needs to be informed by the level of service and, proactive versus reactive
Right.
that you guys have been going on for years.
With your concurrence, I will withdraw the motion.
Okay, that's fine.
Motion's been withdrawn. Further discussion?
So what's the expectation now?
That they're coming back in a month with a professional opinion, which will be an agenda item requested by Trustee McIntosh. That'll be on next month's agenda.
And then you're going to include this sheet to make sure that next month.
Yes, sir.
So you have it at the time.
Yep.
And by then, will you have an estimated cost of this predictive modeling?
We hope to. That would be the goal.
That would be nice.
Thank you.
Back to that question. This board has defined the level of service, and we've given you that instruction, and that's what you've been operating to, and that's what you keep referring to. Now, if we want to change that level of service, that's a whole different discussion. I myself do not think we want to change. I don't think our constituents want to change that level of service. So let's be clear about what we're doing here. Namely, that we're going to keep the same level of service that we have had, and that the data, which you've described as being not comprehensive and not accurate, or not complete, for sure. So I don't know how you get positive reinforcement with that kind of background.
A little challenging.
I have one more comment. Given the level of service and as we go through the exercise in the public education committee, it strikes me the level of service we have requires three things: to have 100% of the assets operating 100% of the time at 100% efficiency. That's basically how you're structured to operate according to laws. As just spoken to what's demanded of it, correct? That if there's a break, people are on it straight away.
Right.
And no interruption.
With the variation of there is redundancy that's built in just to make sure the 100% operational.
Right.
So not all assets are operating entirely, but you are correct. It's being proactive, and if something breaks, getting on it, especially if it's critical. Linear assets, water and sewer systems don't have a backup. Water line breaks, and you're in the middle of it, your tap's there, you get no water.
Right.
Plan I have backups and redundancy. You are correct.
I just like to say one thing. We've been talking about a level of service here. And what we failed to do was collect customer service data the past 20 years. I mean, we could plot every month how many customers had interrupted service. We could plot it. We could plot the breakage and trend all the stuff, but we haven't kept the data. And so when we talk about level of service, it's kind of like a subjective object you throw in the world. There's no way that you guys have defined that over the past 20 years. I see nothing. You know what I mean? So it's a subjective attitude, but we really have a deficiency because we have not been collecting the data, which any business would do. I mean, I had customer service managers in every business I ran. And I wanted to know the trends.
So
We
one
have no
thing,
trends. We have little data. And so I'm trying to struggle with this nebulous concept of dirty water and clean water, right?
so we've summarized the level of service to make it easier, and we've talked, I've been here 13 years, and we've talked about it for 13 years. We summarized it at this point in time by saying when people turn their water on, they want water. When they flush it, they want it to go away. In our asset management plan, we've refined those in February of 23 and made it more comprehensive. 10 or 12 higher levels of service. Chapter 217, 290, 312, they all have standards of level of service we have to meet. Our business plan, our monthly operations report, we have multiple KPIs that we use to track the level of service. I prepared a document this morning that brings it all into one that's under review. So if somebody says, what's your level of service? Here's the definition of it.
I'd love to see them.
But when it's ready, we'll definitely pass it out. One thing is, we don't know the number of customers that are out of service. Because our customers, I know Mud 6 is out of service. That's all I know. The rest of that data would have to go to Woodlands Water, to the Mud and say, hey, who's out of water? Because we don't handle those communications to the Muds. Randy and his team and Mike and definitely do a great job at that. So the other part of it is, 20 years ago, you don't always know all the data you need. So we're collecting all the data we know we need at the time then. And we didn't know about predictive modeling. And so now that we know it, we are going back and saying, okay, let's collect additional more information going forward. So
I don't see the connection, the direct connection between this original conversation and service levels. I mean, this is about replacement costs, and I know ultimately if the pipes are not good and they start breaking at rates alarmingly so, then yeah, you might have an issue with service level. But I think this conversation initially started talking about, let's get an idea of whether or not we can stretch out the replacement of pipes and or fix pipes without having to replace pipes over a period of time. I guess I lost something somewhere along the line. I don't see the direct connection to the original conversation to service levels. Unless we decide to change what's already been put in place as to the plan for replacement and all that stuff. I mean, I'm lost, I guess.
You're looking over here like I'm.
That ain't gonna happen, Ted. Boil it down, if you want a high level of service, then you replace it sooner. If you are less worried about that high level of service, if you can accept more breaks, then you're willing to stretch it out over a longer period of time and spread that cost out over a lot more years.
And I get that, but I don't, I'll do a little bit more research on that one. I'll come back clearer next week.
I think there's a
Next
quick
month.
answer. The level of service is the basis for being proactive in identifying water lines that are near the end of their service life. And we have put them in the schedule to replace. And what's coming into question is the level of service too high and we're being too proactive? Or do we need to be less proactive, but still not reactionary?
Well, going back to Paul's original comment, nowhere along the line did we want to change level of service, right?
And
So,
that's why we did the plan that we did.
right, and it exists today, right? It's already in existence.
Move along. Is there complete discussion
Thank y'all.
for everyone? Thank you very much,
We
gentlemen.
know the direction we're supposed to.
Thank you very much. This moves us to agenda item number 10. Update on the San Jacinto Regional Flood Planning Group meeting of June 8th. Trustee Gainer.
Thank you. This was requested of me by President Lux, and I'm going to be trying to prepare the notes. So the board of the San Jacinto Regional Flood Planning Group met on June 8th at the Harris Galveston Subsidence District Friendswood office. Some of you may not be aware that I'm a member of that board representing the upper watershed, which comprises the entire river basin consisting east and west forks, of east and west forks of San Jacinto River and tributaries that all drain into Lake Houston. At the June 8th meeting, the board unanimously adopted the amended regional flood plan following revisions to the original regional flood plan submitted to the Texas Water Development Board on January the 10th of this year. Board then authorized Fries and Nichols, the group's technical consultant, to submit the amended plan to the TWDB by the due date of July 14th, 2023. And the Fries and Nichols is also working on updating the website with the revised information. I know we've been talking about a little bit of money here, and I thought it might be appropriate to mention what has been approved in the regional flood plan. So flood mitigation projects those are projects that are basically shovel ready, if you want to call it that. There's 70 of them. The total cost is $31.8 billion. That's with a B. A lot of that cost is the coastal spine, the Ike Dike project that's in the mid-20s. So the rest is comprised of projects all over the regional area. Flood management strategies, these are more diffuse kinds of proposals for things like buyouts of people in floodplains, advanced warning systems, and so forth. There's 66 of those, total cost estimate $1.2 billion. Flood management evaluations, these relate to embryonic projects, if you will, that need a lot more analysis. So hydraulic and hydrologic modeling to complete the details of the eventual project, and there's 405 of those. So and that's only 908 million for that. So puts the whole thing in perspective, I would hope, when we well, this has been neglected for a century. So the chickens have come home to roost, so to speak. And how are we going to get the money? That's a very good question. I don't know. But I suggest you go to sanjacintofloodplanning.org for I'll give you the link. No, that's all I have to say.
Excellent report. Thank you, trustee.
One quick question, the flood mitigation projects, what was the total cost? 1.1 billion?
31.8 billion, 70 projects, but the vast overwhelming amount is the Ike Dike and the gates across the Boulevard Pass there. So
Thank you. Agenda item number 10, receive attorney's report. Attorney Yates.
That's 11.
Oh, excuse me, 11. Thank you.
Legislative update. Regular session wrapped as expected. There has been one and likely to be multiple special sessions dealing with school vouchers. We're still tracking the tax tug of war between the House and the Senate to see what, if any, impact that would have on special purpose districts. The Senate version would not. It's just school district taxes. The reduction on the appraisal cap 10 to 5% that's proposed by the House that would also apply to not just residential homesteads, but also rentals and commercial properties that could be an impact. So we're trying to see where it goes right now. There's still a stalemate. As for bills that we talked about during the session, as usual, most of them did not pass. The bill that would have required directors to be landowners and not just residents. We talked about that bill several times. That failed. The bill that was filed for virtual meetings failed. The bill that would have prohibited the use of public funds for lobbying failed. The bill that allows for the construction contract threshold to be increased from 75,000 to 150,000. That one actually did pass. The PFC reform bill, we talked about that last month, Public Facility Corporation bill. these apartment complexes go into tax exempt status. That bill did pass. It does have a significant fix for water districts that will require for those exemptions to be approved by the district or a fee in lieu of taxes to be approved. That bill, it can be effective immediately if it's approved by the governor. It has not yet been signed by the governor. Deadline 2 days, or else it passes by operation of law, but there is still a chance it could be vetoed. So those are some of the large bills. There will, of course, we'll be doing our typical comprehensive summary of the legislative session that we do after each session, that will cover the bills that passed, that will be implementing those omnibus bill that passed. It did update a number of odds and ends related to special purpose districts, notice to purchasers, and other odds and ends that we'll be implementing in the coming months. But that should be ready for your meeting. That's all I have. Happy to answer questions if you got them. All right,
Thank you.
very much.
Agenda item 12, discuss new billing system, Veritex 1. Maureen and General Manager Peterson, please.
Defer that next month. You're still negotiating.
Go down to. Okay. Agenda item 13, General Manager's report. General Manager Peterson.
Most of the items we have covered that I was going to discuss. I wanted to point out, I had talked about SRA and some of the things that I was going to discuss with Jace. I did want to also point out that Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District will also be looking for a new general manager. The result of that will be that in the year 2023, all three of the major water agencies in Montgomery County will have new leadership between WWA, SGRA, and then Groundwater. That's pretty significant. So just something to think about. I know we knew each one was happening, but something to think about. I have a few notes in the packet. One was a letter from John Yours to Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District. There's some additional information that you'll hear from John Geiger next week in the meetings. That's in the packet as well. And I believe that was it.
Very good. Questions? Hearing none. Agenda item 14, receive ad hoc committee reports on the following: personnel, finance and audit, public education. Personnel committee, I'll go first. Personnel committee did not meet. There was no meeting scheduled prior to this meeting. However, there will be a meeting called on either a Tuesday or a Wednesday. We're trying to find out the exact date prior to the June 12th Board of Trustees meeting. Audit and finance?
We didn't have any meetings.
No meeting.
That was an easy month.
Okay. Public Education Committee, Trustee Gaynor?
Yes, we did meet yesterday. One of the three. So, received an update from SJRA. The Director of Communication for Ramsey has in fact prepared the schedule. That is an important schedule because it drops right into the approval process for the consultant who will be providing planning for public communication and information on the big projects that are. One thing she noted that state requirements on procurement require that only SJRA employees be involved in scoring the proposals that come in from the consultants. That being said, Woodlands Water will participate in the review of the submissions to provide feedback to SJRA. In the interest of time, we also reviewed, I'll speak very briefly, the committee also reviewed the second quarter messaging efforts and Also, the article that will be put into the community impact on the reassessment of water loss following the completion of installation of the smart meters. And then some, and looking forward, kinds of discussions took place. More information on Water Smart. We're going to penetrate, get that information out there more. Revisiting reading your bill. We need to do that. And then we're also going to be looking at comparative analysis of special district property tax rates. That's obviously a huge discussion. And then finally, the next quarter's focus will be on water conservation. We're coming into the summer, and it's timely and topical to have that. So that's my report.
Very good. Excellent report. Thank you, Trustee Gaynor. Agenda item 15, recess, not required. Okay, so we reconvene. Yes,
Just reminded of something else I needed to cover.
please.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Vernon. It was related to the resignation of Jace. There was a suggestion to me to offer up a letter on behalf of the trustees or the MUDs as a letter of accommodation to Jace for his many years of great service to not only SGRA, but also to the Woodlands Division. So it was something that I wanted to suggest to the trustees that we put together for you, if you so choose.
I would put that in the form of a motion that we can direct the general manager to prepare such a commendation. Second required.
Chairman, I just think an acclaim from this board is all that will be necessary for that.
Okay, is that accurate? Right, a voice acclamation to direct. Okay. Acclamation, all in favor of proceeding that way? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Trustee Martin. Reconvene, we don't. Aside from the agenda item for Arthur Bredehoff to discuss Region H after the meeting on July 12th, the excess GRP capacity brought forth by Trustee Smith, the failure analysis for professional opinion brought forth by Trustee McIntosh, and the deferral of agenda item 12 for the Veritex 1. Is there any other matters to be placed on next month's agenda? Hearing none, I adjourn this meeting.